Good evening. My name is Allison Dundies-Renteln. I've been on the faculty here in political science since 1987, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce our distinguished speaker. David Campbell is the John Cardinal O'Hara CSC Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Notre Dame and the founding director of the Rooney Center for the Study of American Democracy. His bachelor's degree in political science is from Brigham Young University. He graduated magna cum laude and was the valedictory speaker there. His master's degree and PhD are both from Harvard University. He is a prolific scholar. He is the co-author with Robert Putnam of American Grace, How Religion Divides and Unites Us. He's the author of Why We Vote, How School and Communities Shape Our Civic Life. And he's the editor of A Matter of Faith, Religion in the 2004 presidential election. He has written and edited a number of books dealing with educational policy, topics such as school vouchers, charter schools, and civic engagement. And he's written many, many articles in the fields of religion and politics. His research has won awards from the Maine Association in Political Science, the American Political Science Association, and his research has been supported by major grants from the National Science Foundation, the National Academy of Education, and the Templeman Foundation. He is often sought after by the media to comment on various political events and issues, and is often quoted in the major news media such as the New York Times, C-SPAN, the Wall Street Journal, and so on. The title of his talk this afternoon, as you can see, Is This the Mormon Moment? Will Mitt Romney Be the Mormon's JFK? We're all very much looking forward to his remarks. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome to USC.
Well, thank you very much for those words and for the introduction. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here at USC, and as a Notre Dame guy, that's really saying something for me to say that. I have to admit, I had mixed feelings coming here. I've never been to USC before, but I know all about this place because for one Saturday every year, it's just USC all the time in South Bend. But I was very pleased when I was in the bookstore today. I buy a T-shirt from every campus I visit, so I deposited a little money here at USC so I could get my T-shirt. But I was very pleased to see a table in the bookstore with a bunch of leprechauns for sale. I thought, that's a very classy move on USC's part. And then I walked up to it and realized that this wasn't Notre Dame swag they were selling. It's just because it's St. Patrick's Day. But nonetheless, there it was. Just before I get into my remarks today, I thought that I might disclose some biographical information about myself that might be relevant for the discussion today. I, of course, teach at Notre Dame, which means that sometimes there can be a little confusion about my own biography in that people often assume that I'm Catholic. I teach and write on American politics, which often means that people assume that I'm an American. It turns out that neither of those things are true. I am neither a Catholic nor am I an American, yet I teach at a Catholic university about American politics. In fact, a few years ago, this all came to a head, those biographical facts about myself, when I was asked to participate on a roundtable at Notre Dame, the sorts of things campuses do all the time. This was a panel discussion on Catholics and American politics. I said, sure, happy to do it. Went to the event and introduced myself similarly to the way I just did now, saying, two things you should know about me. I'm neither Catholic nor am I an American, but if you want to hear what a non-Catholic, non-American has to say about Catholics and American politics, stick around. And they got about the same kind of laugh as it did here. This is what passes for a joke in political science. But the very next day, the campus newspaper at Notre Dame, The Observer, had as its front page story an article about that roundtable. And the story began with the following sentence. Yesterday, Professor David Campbell, neither a Catholic nor an American, said... So I always feel like I'm a fish out of water, and I never quite know where I fit. But there was one other biographical fact that you may have picked up in the introduction. Certainly some in the room had their radar on and would have clued in on the important detail that came from my undergraduate education, which is that I attended Brigham Young University. And if it isn't clear already, you should know now that I am not a Catholic, but I am a Mormon. And so I do speak from inside the culture, as I'll talk a little bit about Mormonism today. And it just felt like it was important for me to get that out there. And I want to just point here to my opening slide that it is possible for the Trojans and the Irish to live together in harmony. So if there's anything else we can learn from this, it's a great bridge building opportunity. So I'm going to talk today. Here we go. I'm going to talk today about Mitt Romney, John F. Kennedy, but probably more important, some broader themes, broader questions that come up given the comparisons between these two presidential candidates. But just before I get into that, I just want to make the point that we all know that I'm here today because a few years ago, a Mormon almost won the most important election in America, by which, of course, I mean David Archuleta and American Idol. Okay, so again, that's what passes for a joke in my business. No, actually, I'm here to talk about this guy, Mitt Romney. Not just about him, but he'll set the stage for our discussion of the role that religion plays in politics today, and this question of whether or not Mitt Romney's Mormonism has and will present the same sorts of obstacles that John F. Kennedy's Catholicism caused him to face in 1960. But before I actually get into the discussion and the comparison between Romney and Kennedy and what we can learn from these two examples, I actually want to set the stage for just sort of the overall state of religion in America, and more specifically what we might think of as the state of religious tolerance in America. So I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, if it's all right, about some findings from the book that was mentioned in the very generous introduction that was given, that I recently published with Robert Putnam at Harvard, entitled American Grace, How Religion Divides and Unites Us. This is the hardback. This is the paperback edition, which is just out. You can buy it today. Anyway, this book is not about Mormons. It's not about Catholics. It's about religion in general. And it covers a lot of different questions and themes about religion in American society. But it primarily answers the following question. How can Americans simultaneously be three things? How can we be a country that is, A, religiously devout, and compared to other advanced industrialized democracies, America is a very religious country? How can we be religiously diverse? We have a wide array of religions in America, and we're only getting more diverse as time goes on. How can we combine those two facts with the third characteristic of religion in American society, a high level of religious tolerance? Now, it's that third claim that some audiences find to be, they're a little skeptical of. But let me show you a little bit of evidence to suggest that perhaps Americans actually do get along with those of other faiths to a much greater extent than is appreciated by those who might only be watching cable news programs. American Grace, the book that I've mentioned, has as its backbone a major survey that Bob Putnam and I commissioned of over 3,000 Americans, randomly sampled from around the country. We asked them every imaginable thing that you could come up with about their religion, about their graphic background, about their civic involvement, about their family life, you name it, we asked it. And among the many questions that we asked was the following question. Do you believe that a good person not of your faith can go to heaven? What you're looking at is how Americans from many different religious traditions answered that question. 98% of Mormons, 96% of mainline Protestants, 95% of Jews, 93% of Catholics, and so on, all say that a good person not of their faith can still go to heaven. And that includes 83% of evangelical Protestants. The one group in America that you might think has some pretty strong opinions on who gets in the door, but nonetheless, 83% of evangelical Christians say, yeah, actually a good person not of my faith can still go to heaven. Now I can tell that this is a pretty skeptical bunch. That even though I'm here at USC, I know that this is a group of people who are thinking hard about these questions, and you're sitting there thinking, wait a sec, doesn't this just mean that the Methodists think the Presbyterians can go to heaven, or the Episcopals think that the Lutherans can go to heaven, and that isn't quite the same thing as saying that a Catholic believes a Jew can go to heaven or that a Jew thinks a Muslim can go to heaven. Well, that's all true. So we share your skepticism, and on our survey we asked a follow-up question. After folks got this question, do you believe a good person, not of your faith, can go to heaven? We then asked of those who come from a Christian background, what if that person isn't a Christian? These are the results. Once again, 98% of Mormons agree, 83% of Catholics, 79% of mainline Protestants, and even 54% of evangelical Protestants. Now, it's lower here than that percentage we saw earlier, but it's still over half of evangelical Protestants. The one group that you might think would have the strongest opinions on who gets to heaven, 54% of them still say that even a non-Christian can go to heaven. I've spoken to many different audiences about this finding, and I can assure you that among evangelical Christians themselves, or especially among evangelical Christian clergy and theologians, this is a very troubling number. But there are the facts. Most Americans are perfectly willing to accept those of other religions, to the extent that they're perfectly willing to say that those folks can even go to heaven. Lest you think that that particular question is somehow quirky or idiosyncratic, here's a little more evidence for the idea that Americans are very comfortable with people of other religions. On our survey, we also asked, do you think that religious diversity has been good for America? What you're looking at is the percentage of Americans of varying degrees of their own personal religiosity or religious commitment, how they answered that question. And across the board, you can see that overwhelming majorities of Americans say that religious diversity has been a good thing for America. Whether it's the very least religious people, 84% of them, all the way up to the most religious, 74%. So overwhelming majorities of Americans say, yeah, actually religious diversity is a good thing. We also asked, do you believe that there is very little truth in any religion? Do you believe that one religion is true and others are not, which would presumably mean your own religion, if you answer yes? Or do you believe that there are basic truths in many religions? And as you can see, an overwhelming percentage of Americans fall into that middle category, that there are basic truths in many religions. All of this is evidence that Americans are very comfortable with people of other faiths. However, that is not to say that all religions are viewed with equal favorability. On the big survey that I mentioned earlier, we asked a series of questions designed to gauge how Americans feel about those of a different faith. We did this using a rather hokey question on our big survey, known as a feeling thermometer. Now, when I use that term, I know that sounds like the sort of thing you might do in therapy. Let's all get together and talk about our feelings and use a thermometer. But all it means is, on the survey, if you were one of our respondents, you were asked to give your rating, how you felt toward a series of religious groups. And actually, social scientists use this for not just religions, politicians, various companies. If you are interested in how the American public perceives your brand of toothpaste, you might ask a similar type of question. But we were interested in religion. So we asked these folks, how do you feel about, Jews or Catholics or evangelicals, et cetera, et cetera. And they could give us a score between 0 and 100. 0 meaning you feel really negatively or cold toward that group. 100 meaning you feel very positive or very warm toward that group. 50 meaning you're completely neutral. And you can pick a score anywhere in between. So I'm a Boston Red Sox fan. You ask me about the Red Sox, I'd probably give them a score of 90, or at least I would have until their September collapse, in which case it was about a 10. But that's another.